Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Advanced Ball Striking Podcast. Today we're going to talk about, on Neil's suggestion, the Talent Code, which I just started reading, and how it relates to all the modules in Advanced Ball Striking. So Neil, why don't you start us off with a summary of the book?
All right. Well, straight away on the cover of the book, this is my copy of the book. It says "The Talent Code" by Daniel Coyle. Greatness isn't born; it's grown, which is a message that I just love straight away, because it tells us that there's no such thing as natural talent. Everything is about learning skills. So that for me, as a student at ABS, that's exactly the sort of message that I'd love to hear. As a teacher, John, that must be a great message for you to be able to tell people, you can learn skills.
Yeah, I've always felt like the golf swing is something that can be learned. And, with the Olympics going on, this week, it's kind of a reminder that, skill sets aren't just, you don't just become an Olympic athlete. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of coaching, a lot of training. And when I read the talent code, it did reference a lot of the Olympic athletes and people that gained real excellence. I've always been interested in excellence, becoming as good as possible. When I was growing up, I had my sights on being, the best for my age, the best I could be in college, amateur golf, professional, just trying to become to self actualize myself into the best possible player I could become. But I think technique is really really important, and if you've got great technique, it just makes the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah, go on.
I was ask what so Daniel Coyle is the author of the Talent Code. Let's have a summary of the book first, and then we can discuss how it relates to the modules in ABS.
All right. Well, one thing he mentions on the let's see, within the front of the book, the back of the book, it says he reveals why some teaching methods are so much more effective than others. Now, that's the bit that I want to really get into. Why is it some people don't improve? Why is it that using certain methods, and I feel like ABS, and I'm not the first person to notice this. You'll remember, William, on the forum 15 years ago, somebody brought up this book and mentioned how it applies to ABS. I think I started a thread on the forum about 2 years ago about why it's difficult to make a change in the golf swing, and I think that was before John read the book. And one of the guys, 72 Holeouts, used to be called Dedicated to the Journey, he says, "Oh, John, don't bother reading the book. You already know this stuff." And I think that's probably right. John intuitively, as a professional athlete, knew what was being taught about in this book. I think it's amateurs like you and me, William, who are lazy, who don't practice in smart ways. This was a huge learning curve for me reading this book.
Wish I read it years ago when it was first introduced on the forum.
So just to go back to greatness isn't born, it's grown, and why certain teaching methods are so much more effective than others. So that's what I sort of hope we'll get through. So anyway, summary of the book. It's split into three parts. There is a section called Deep Practice, which I think we're going to get into quite a lot. Ignition, which I don't think we'll talk about a great deal, which is really just sort of inspiration. You've got to be inspired, and you've got to be ignited to practice hard, to get involved in deep practice, to put the hours in. But I don't think we'll get too much into that. And it also goes into the third section is on master coaching. So it explains a lot how certain coaches gain the experience to become world-class teachers. Again, I don't think we'll get into that too much. I think what we're going to get into is the first part. Maybe we can do those other sections later. The first part, which is deep practice, and that's the bit that I'm particularly interested in.
So what is deep practice?
Well, deep practice, he talks about it a lot, but it's oddly unsatisfying the way he explains it, and he certainly doesn't give any examples of what deep practice are in golf. But I've got some notes here, which I don't intend to read all of this out. but I've got some notes here where he defines deep practice as operating at the edge of your ability. He says struggling in certain targeted ways, operating at the edges of your ability, where you make mistakes makes you smarter. So it's all about pushing yourself beyond what you can actually do. Experiences where you are forced to slow down, make errors, and correct them. Slipping and stumbling end up making you swift and graceful without realizing it. The trick is to choosing a goal which is just beyond your present abilities to target the struggle. Thrashing blindly doesn't help. So, like I say, it's not the most satisfying definition or description, but it's basically pushing yourself beyond your current ability levels. That's where you're going to see improvement. I mean, if we were
He gives
go on.
examples. I think he illustrates it with examples of what the. I agree with you. That definition is a little vague, but the examples he gives, I think, are illustrative, and we can maybe talk about them and how the ABS module series are further examples. Like, for instance, his suggestion for Shaquille O'Neal to as a relatively poor, well, let's just be honest, a poor free throw shooter, and how Daniel Coyle Daniel Coyle refers, I believe, to someone else who's saying what he would teach him or suggest to him is, instead of doing the free throw line, which is 15 feet from the hoop, do 14 feet, 16 feet.
Yeah, so it's not just
break it up a bit.
What was that, John?
I mean, to just kind of break it up a bit to where, doing free throws from different distances, shorter, longer, just to change the perspective, maybe.
Yeah, is that an example of deep practice, Neil?
Yeah, because you're pushing yourself just outside of what the norm would be. I mean, why don't we go through some examples of what would not be deep practice, and then go through some ideas of what would be, and then we'll maybe talk about ABS as well. I mean, going to the driving range and getting a basket of balls and just hitting 7-irons into a big wide open field certainly wouldn't be deep practice.
Which is what most people do.
Which is what most people do, yeah. So that gets back to what I was saying. Why certain teaching methods are so much more effective than others. So just going to the range and hitting 100 balls into a wide open field, hitting the same shot. If you hit a fade, you're just hitting a fade. Just doing that all day long isn't really going to get you anywhere.
One of the problems with the driving range is that you're always on a level lie. Okay, so when you're on the golf course, at least the courses that I grew up on, I played a lot of undulation golf courses, side hill lies, downhill lies, uphill lies, and then when you're on the driving range, whatever that prevailing wind, if you're out there for an hour or two and the wind's just blowing one way and you're just hitting shots with that wind, when you're on the golf course, every hole's different, pointing a different direction. So you've got wind coming from different angles, different lies, and this sort of thing. And driving ranges just don't prepare you for that. So if you're hitting the ball good on the driving range, a lot of people will struggle taking that to the golf course because it's a completely different situation. So I think it has some value, the driving range, but I would say that it's not deep practice. That is how I would explain that. You really need something better than that. And the same thing with equipment. I mean, I went to a driving range recently and I just saw pretty much 9 out of 10 people just with a big frying pan drivers just smashing the ball, and that's pretty much all they were interested in. But if you look at a round of golf, you're really only trying to hit the ball as far as possible, just a few times around. Let's just say you're a good golfer and you shoot 72 par. You're certainly not trying to hit the ball as far as you can when you're putting, chipping, wedges, any iron, certainly not on par threes. So it would only be tee shots is the only time you'd really be trying to hit it as far as possible. Even on par fives, I think you would be trying to position, if you can't reach the green, you'd be trying to position the ball to open up the pin for a little wedge shot or whatever. So without the par threes, you're looking at 14 shots off the tee, and of those 14, certainly there's dog legs, so you don't want to hit it as far as possible on a dog leg to hit it through the fairway. So we're really only looking at maybe 6 or 8 times around that you'd be trying to hit it as far as possible. So out of 72 holes, I mean, what about the other 64, 66 shots? And that's not focusing on hitting as far as possible. So golf isn't really about hitting it as far as possible. Long drive contests are, but not the game of golf. So I think preparing yourself for the game of golf and spending your time. I think the book talks about the quality of time, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, definitely.
So making your practice as efficient as possible, and spending your time on the things that really matter. If it's starting with putting, I mean, I think getting a good feel for the pace of the green, long putts. When I interviewed the great Billy Dunk, one of the greatest players to Australian players, didn't really play a whole lot in the States or anything, so it's a name that's not familiar with people. But he was just one of the great players down there. And he talked about just lag putting, and he'd get on the green and just go putt across the practice green. If it was 60, 80 feet, whatever was available, he would just work on that. If you can get the feel for speed from 80 feet, then the feel for speed is pretty easy from 40 feet. So again, that would be an example to me of deep practice. You would make things tougher to take the most difficult thing and learn that, and then everything becomes easier. That's why I practice with a 1 iron pretty much all the time, um, because it's the hardest club to hit. It's harder to hit a 1 iron than it is a driver or a 3 wood. Certainly harder to hit a 1 iron than a 4 iron or a 5 iron. If I can master hitting a 1 iron, then it's pretty easy to hit a 3 iron, or pretty easy to hit a 5 iron or a 7 iron. The technique needed to hit a 1 iron I like to hit off the deck, or if I'm on a range and I'm hitting some 1 irons, I'll try and find an area where it's more hard pan, a hard lie. I have to have better um, low point control for that. So always putting myself in a position of this is more difficult than what I'm going to face on the golf course. When I get out on the golf course, it's like, wow, oh, this is easy. So I think that's, to me, the deep practice is setting yourself up, challenging yourself, making it harder than it's probably going to be on the course. And then when you get out there, then it kind of takes the pressure off. Like, oh, this is pretty easy.
Is there
Yeah,
a?
and you
Sorry, Neil. You.
I was going to say, John, and you always play with blades, and you encourage students to play with blades for this very reason as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but blades also in the long term is going to help you improve, because with a blade iron, you can feel where on the club face you're hitting it. So then your brain's like, oh, I was a little bit on the toe or a little bit on the heel. If you have a cavity back iron, you can't tell as well where you hit the golf ball. So you're going to improve your sweet spot control with the blade iron, and eventually you get it. And then with the blade iron, you can typically control working and shaping the ball better with the blade iron. So I think a blade iron, well, at first it might be more difficult, but in the end, you're going to end up being a better ball striker. And really, all the really great ball strikers, they're all hitting blade irons. I don't think there's ever been a legendary player that just played cavity backs, their career. They're great players. I mean, even Tiger in the modern era, the greatest player of the modern era, is hitting pretty true to the blade irons. And I just recently did a video about him when he held all 4 major championships, the Tiger Slam, and Butch was talking to him uh, that he practiced with persimmon. He practiced with the persimmon driver when he was home, and he grew up with that too. So he was kind of in that middle. Like, as a junior player, he grew up in the persimmon era, and as it was transferring over to the modern game, so he developed those deeper skill sets from clubs that were that would appear to most people to be more difficult to hit. But it would be similar to like race car driving. You can get in a car that's easy to drive, like a big Cadillac that's really cushy and everything. It's really comfortable. And to me, that's kind of like a cavity back. It's kind of easy, it's comfortable. A high performance race car with a tight suspension and a high compression gearbox, and that it's difficult to learn to shift through the gears and with a clutch and all that, like the Formula One race cars and that sort of thing. Very, very difficult. And your average person just off the street, hey, get in this car, they probably wouldn't even know how to get around the first turn or something. But that's the car that's really going to give you the most mobility and high performance and cornering and acceleration. And these are all skill sets that need to be learned in auto racing. I've met a few auto racers in my life. So I think it's kind of similar to hitting blade irons and just learning, better ball control and those skill sets. You really need the equipment that's going to help be your friend and teach you those skill sets. So I'm a big advocate of that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly playing with blades, you're going to learn probably more from hitting 50 blades, 50 practice shots with a blade than you are with 100 balls with a cavity back, just because of the feedback loop. You're just getting more and more feedback.
Brain needs the feedback. You have to have the feedback. If your brain doesn't know where you're hitting it on the club face, you simply can't improve. You can't. And that's why I'm not a big proponent of the really big headed drivers, because you just can't tell where on the club face you're hitting the ball. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. When we did the Persimmon and Blade event down in Las Vegas, the TRJ events, we did a few of those, and we had some good pro players and coming down there to play, and always was playing Persimmon and Blade, so I never hit cavity backs when I was a professional, or the big headed drivers or the big berthas or anything like that, and I just continued to play Persimmon. So we had the tournament, and everyone else was playing cavity backs and the big headed drivers. And we went down to the event, and the guys that used to be able to hit that stuff, they used to be able to hit Persimmon just fine and blades. All of a sudden, they couldn't do it anymore. They went back to the older stuff, and it's like they couldn't hit it. And I went out and won the tournament by 7 shots, and I hadn't played a tournament in almost 20 years, and I just wiped everybody out. So I think that was, just not I'm not trying to jump up and down in my own glory or anything, but I think it really has more to do with just the fact that my body and my mind it never let go of that. I always, I never wanted to give up the skill sets that I had developed, and to go with something that's easier to hit might benefit me in the short term, but it's going to hurt me in the long term, because once I start to lose that sense of where the sweet spot is and where the feedback is, my golf swing is going to deteriorate. And I had this issue when I was playing in college golf, where our coach had given us everyone on the team got free ping irons, and I was playing Hogan blades, Apex blades, and I'd everything that I'd won in junior golf and in college up until that point was with blade irons. And at first, I hit them okay, and the coach was like, "Hey, these are easier to hit. Your team's going to have an advantage." Blah blah blah, that kind of argument. But after about a month, I noticed I wasn't hitting the ball as good as I was with blade irons, and it kind of puzzled me, because I thought, well, these are easier to hit. I should be hitting it better. So I thought, well, I'll go back to my hitting my Hogans, and I went back, and I literally couldn't hit them at all. I mean, I was hitting it so bad, I wouldn't even have been able to make the golf team. That's how bad it was. And it was a big aha moment. I thought, you know what? My brain needs that feedback and that precision. So I went back to the blades against my coach's wishes. And then I went out and won the conference championship with blades. It took me about a couple weeks to get it back. Went out and won the conference championship, beating everybody with cavity backs and all that, because I knew that I wanted to pursue excellence and be as good as I possibly could. And that was the path for me to do that, was through clubs that were more designed for the higher skilled level of ball striking, if that makes sense.
That gets into just reading the first chapter, the preface in the first chapter. That to me gets into the importance of being able to make mistakes and correct them, and to adjust. if you're hitting a cavity back or a big driver and you can't feel anything, you don't know when you don't have a you don't know directly intrinsically that you made a mistake, something to correct, right? Where with a blade iron, you know exactly where your misses are, and
That's
it's not about hitting it perfect the first time. It's about making an error that you are able to correct. Right. That's what I got from.
feedback. You need the feedback. Your brain needs feedback to improve, and the more precise the feedback, the quicker you're going to improve. And that's why I'm an advocate of practicing with a one iron. Because I mean, nothing's gonna give you more feedback than that. I mean, it's gonna really punish your miss hits.
Yeah,
And when
one
you
of the
learn to
one of
hit a
the
one iron, you're good to go.
one of the definitions again was struggling in certain targeted ways where you make mistakes makes you smarter. So you've got to make mistakes, but learn from the mistakes. So I know John's been advocating blades ever since I've been reading John talking about golf, and that was the reason why. I mean, like I say, John, I think you automatically just understood the message from the talent code. Um, let's go through some more examples of deep practice. Tiger Woods' famous 9-shot routine where he would hit three, three high shots, high draw, high fade, high straight. Then he would hit 3 low ones, low draw, low fade, low straight, and then he would hit medium height, draw, fade. He had these 9 different shots to hit through 9 different windows. That is
Mhm.
pushing yourself beyond most people's ability. Most people can't hit 9 different shots. I mean, is this why Tiger was, the greatest modern player? Because he had the best practice routine?
Yeah, I mean that's a great thing to practice, but it's more realistic as to what you're going to face on the golf course. You're just sitting there hitting balls on the driving range. Um, it's really limiting. It's just not as realistic. And I think what Tiger was doing there is more realistic because when you get on the course, it's like, for an advanced player, you're not just trying to hit the ball, you're trying to shape the ball based upon where the pin placement is or what the fairway is doing. So the idea that Tiger would learn all those shots, makes perfect sense. I mean, that's just a great practice drill.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Hogan said that he used to practice on the driving range all of the shots that he was going to hit on the course. So Hogan wasn't just standing there hitting his fade all day, thousands of balls. He said he practiced every single shot that he had to hit. And I'm sure there's a story in one of the books about Hogan, and I think it talks about when he was like 80-year-old and he went to hit the last balls that he ever hit before before he died, and he took 3 balls with him, put 3 balls in his pocket, went out on the practice area and hit 3 balls. And I can't remember if it was the Jody Vasquez book or whatever, but he said the reason he took 3 balls was he was going to hit a draw, a fade, and hit one straight. And I think that for me just proves that Hogan was pushing himself as well. He wasn't just standing there hitting the famous Hogan fade all day long. I mean, um, what about putting then, John? What do you think about putting? I think you've mentioned before that the best drill you saw someone do was where you used to put from all different distances rather than just like knocking them all in from 3 feet or 4 feet.
Yeah, I think getting a feel for the speed of the green, the greens is I think the most important thing. Now, if you have good technique, then you should be able to cover the ball coming off the blade consistently every time. And that's something that I didn't do so well. I didn't have good technique when I was in college or even as a professional. I didn't really understand putting until fairly recently when I started to really look back at the great putters and changed my technique radically. Basically, I just got rid of putting and I went to what the kind of chip rolling, using a chipping technique to putt, which I found to be much better because I was a good chipper and not a good putter. So that helped me get the ball to come off the blade the same and almost get a little hook spin on it so that it takes off and rolls out really well. And I wish I would have known that when I was playing full time. But that being said, I felt like that learning process was I did learn good technique chipping that I had, and I just had to apply that to putting, and it was an aha moment. It's like these things don't need to be different. I don't need a square grip on my putter. I mean, every other club in the bag, I'm I'm gripping a round grip, and then suddenly, my caddy's going to hand me, a club that's that's has a really whippy shaft with a square grip, and it's really upright and lightweight and all this. Nothing like any of the other clubs in my bag. And I thought, well, why am I doing this? Why is this? And well, somebody a long time ago said, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. But I'm one to question things, and even in the modern era, like Bryson DeChambeau, when he went to the same length all his irons. I don't know if he's still doing that, but I like just the idea of somebody thinking outside the box, like questioning that. I mean, he's like, hey, why, I just want the clubs to be the same length or whatever. I don't think that would have worked in the persimmon and blade era. I don't think you could have a 3 iron or 1 iron at a 6 iron length and hit that well. But I like the idea of questioning, and I think that's part of the process of learning is to question things. And as a teacher, I want to be able to have the answers for people, to the best of my ability as a teacher. If they have a question, I want to not only be able to explain it, but to demonstrate the how and the why, and so that the student can have a clear understanding of the underlying form. And I think that's important.
Should we talk about how the ABS module series does, in very significant ways, implement deep practice as talked about in the talent code? I was thinking just in the preface, there's a beautiful example of a little young, I don't know, girl. I forget how old she was, maybe 12, maybe younger, playing the violin, not particularly good, not particularly good ear for music, but she was practicing two pieces. And one piece, there was a video of her struggling and breaking it down into little bits, playing it, making the mistake, hearing the mistake, replaying it, iterating back and forth until she can play it pretty well. And then, almost oddly, the second piece in the same video, so the same practice session, the second piece, she did like what you were saying, Neil, just hitting 7 irons for an hour onto an open field. Just started playing this other piece just wildly and played it really, really poorly. She didn't use the deep practice technique that she used on that first piece. And well, first, Neil, did I describe that correctly? That's how I remember reading it. But secondly, how is ABS? To me, the ABS module series really describes well. It gets you to do what this girl was doing when she was practicing correctly or implementing deep practice.
Yeah, I mean the three rules as he quotes in the book, the three rules of deep practice are to chunk it up, so break it down into its component parts, and he says you need to slow it down, which is what I think she was called Clarissa, the girl that you're talking about, was doing. Clarissa, so chunk it up, you need to split it down into its component parts. So we're talking about ABS now. What is ABS famous for? The modules. You're splitting you don't in ABS you don't just practice a full golf swing. You don't just video your swing and send a copy of your swing to John and say, what do you think? You get a series of drills to do which represent different phases of the swing. Impact, transition, squeezing the ground with your feet, ground pressures. So in ABS we definitely chunk it up. So the three rules to deep practice: chunk it up, repeat it. I mean, we do thousands and thousands of module drills. I don't know how many times I've hit my impact bag over the years, but I think I'm on my fourth bag by now. And then learn to feel it. So we use heavy clubs to train with, not massively heavy, not ridiculously heavy. We use a heavy club for feel with stiff shafts, and we hit a big heavy impact bag. So the early module drills, we are certainly applying the three rules of deep practice. I chunk it up, repeat it, and learn to feel it. Later on, when we get deeper into the course, we start hitting golf balls, and then we get into the other forms of deep practice, like what the 9 shots that Tiger practiced, we start working on stuff like that. John insists on seeing us hit 3 balls quick, bang, 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 3 balls rapid fire. Did you get that from Mo, John? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I was really impressed by Mo. I spent a lot of time around Mo, and when he was on the range, it was pretty standard. He would just line up balls. He, 3, sometimes 6 in a row, just line them up and just go. And he'd have sometimes 3 balls in the air at the same time. The thing that I found doing that, of course, when I saw that, I like a little kid, I just wanted to emulate that. Like, wow, that's just what's it like to just because rather than standing over each shot and thinking about okay, I got to do this, just boom, boom, boom. It really puts you when like the subconscious mind just starts hitting the golf ball because you don't have time to be thinking about anything. So it's really whatever you have the accumulation of your skill sets up into that point in your golfing development, it's going to be right there. Bam, bam, bam. Um, and then I just found, wow, this is really great because it always looked like that to me when I'd watch a really great player that would just set over the shot. They just take a look or two at the target and just send it on its way. You could tell it was just a very almost like a automatic kind of a thing. More like tennis. You don't have time. The things coming at you. You don't have time to be thinking about your technique or gee, I got to lead with my elbow. Or you're just trying to get the racket on the ball and get it over the net. And I think it hinders golfers in a way. The fact that you do have time. The fact that you can sit there, just look at the ball, and it's not moving. Nobody's throwing you the ball. You don't have to. You don't have anybody, an opponent, getting in the way. You got to maneuver around like other sports. Um, baseball, it's all about the movement, right? I mean, the ball's coming down, you have it hitting a moving ball or throwing or catching and this sort of thing. And golf, the fact that it's just sitting there on the ground and, it's almost a handicap in itself, against the mind. So I really think that the idea of like, look, see the shot that you want to hit in your mind. Here's the ball. There's a target. Get up, do it. And the more you can practice and learn how to draw the ball, fade the ball, where it's just an intuitive, almost a reflex, like boom. I just remember watching some of the really great players when I was coming up as a rookie, and the older guys would they just kind of tap the club behind the ball, da, 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 bam. It's just really quick. Once they pull the club out of the bag, they just lay into that thing and send it on its way. I saw really a sense of maturity there. Something that I didn't have, starting out. I was, really up into my head with the golfing machine and all the, millions of components and thinking about all this stuff. And I think I learned a lot of good technique from that. But at some point, you've got to internalize that stuff and go with what you got. And Mo is just the perfect example of that. I mean, line up the golf balls, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
And I
Trevino also looked like that as well, didn't he? Trevino certainly looked like he just sort of looked at the target, quick
yeah,
shuffle in, reacted. Mo was exactly the same, quick shuffle into the ball and then react to the target.
But that's
yeah,
that's another example of in the talent code, just even in the first chapter, talking about how in order to get that ability, to get that talent, that smoothness, to just get right up there and smoothly hit the ball well without thinking, requires first to develop the skills by chunking it, right, breaking it up into chunks. And even what was the example, Neil, about climbing up a sheet of ice, or where you go very slowly and develop those skills that seem like you're not smooth, and yet you're developing the skills to actually be smooth.
Yeah, he says you sort of people who learn how to be great at things, they seek out the slippery slopes, and you learn by falling on your ass basically.
Yeah, and that to me reminded me directly of the modules. How the modules, you're learning specific skills, and then when you've mastered them individually, module 1, learning the 430 line coming into the bag, module 2, the cohesive body tensions, getting your lower body into it.
the ground
Module 3, the ground pressures. Module 3, really learning the post impact pivot. the engine.
That's the engine. Yeah. Yeah. That's where all the power is, the acceleration.
And when you learn all that and you bring that together, it then you all of a sudden are hitting the ball so much better than you would if you just started just firing 7 irons in the middle of a driving range.
Yeah, when you see students who are doing the module work, certainly the early modules, module one, module two, module three, when you see students who are first starting to learn those, and it is like the way he describes Clarissa when she's learning that song. They almost look. You think, well, they're never going to get this. It just looks like they're nowhere near. But they're struggling to get the club into the starting position, and they hit the bag, and it all looks really awkward. A couple of weeks later, once the video themselves, they look at themselves, they see the mistakes, they learn from the mistakes, they send a video in. Someone like Sir John or myself will have a look at it and help them along. Within a couple of weeks, people look like they've been doing it for 100 years, and it's amazing how quickly you can learn. But you don't learn just by paying for the module video and watching it. You've got to get stuck in and do it. You've got to do it thousands of times. But it really, like I say, the example you're talking about, William, which is right at the start of the book where he talks about Clarissa learning that song, reminded me so much of the students doing the early modules.
Yeah. One of the things that, that we do is in the advanced ball striking course is, you get the correct feedback back from us. So, I mean, I've reshot all the modules and tried to really hammer home the errors that I would see students do over the years. But no matter how many times somebody sees it or watches them, when they actually execute it, they're I don't think I've ever had a student send in a video that just got everything right the first time. I mean, there's always little adjustments and tweaks that we need to do, and to have that oversight. Neil's been working with me too and doing the swing reviews, and to have that guidance and somebody there to just keep redirecting, like, okay, let's get the wrist a little bit more here, or let's have the weight here, or get more spine tilt, or let's the legs need to be doing this or whatever, and just keep working with the student to like just keep bringing them back, getting it closer until all of a sudden everything just lines up and it's like, okay, we got it, we got it, and then we move on to the next thing. And going through that process is, I just think it's the best way to learn is through a lot of repetition and having uh, good oversight, having somebody to look and to make sure that these things are being done correctly. Because just like reading a book, there's nobody there to say, hey, that's not quite right, or you're not getting this right. And that's the problem with book or just a video instruction where you're not having the professional um, tutoring to keep the student on track. I think that's really critical. So I think it's a really great way to teach, much better than just coming to take a lesson. I mean, I have students that come and work with me from all over the world, but we can only get so much done in 3 hours, man. And give them all the information, and they can videotape it and take that all home, and it's certainly beneficial to do that to a certain degree. But I think going through the module courses um, a much better way to learn, because I'm gonna be with the student for years. I mean, it's not just like here's some videos and people say, oh well, it's expensive or whatever, but we're going to be with you for years. And if you break it down, it's, I think, probably over a 2-year period, it's 30 bucks a week or something. Like, it's cheaper than going to take a lesson from just some local pro. And just one other thing I would say with instruction, that there really is two different objectives to hitting a golf ball. One is swinging and hitting. So if you're watching YouTube videos and someone says this and someone else says that, are they coming from a hitting perspective, or are they coming from a swinging perspective? And most of the golf instruction that I see is swinging. It's just it's coming from a swinger's perspective. So it's not applicable to a hitting protocol, and it can be quite damaging, or vice versa. So you have to, the teaching community just hasn't reached that level of, I was going to say, consciousness yet, to where it's like there's hitting and there's swinging, there's timing the release of the shaft, and there's holding shaft flex through the strike. So these are two different things, two different protocols. and I'm a hitting instructor, and I've done both. I've won tournaments as a swinger and as a hitter, and hitting it's a superior method. It just is, and I will argue that to the bone. It's a superior method, and that's why I teach it, because I've done both. Um, but there's a lot of swinging stuff out there. So again, I think from the talent code perspective, the deep practice is breaking these things down and understanding, what is it that's actually being taught here, and then going in and saying, here's the drills we need to do. We're going to break the thing down into sections. We're going to focus on this. We're going to do thousands of repetitions. We're going to learn these movements correctly, and we're going to get it right. Because I believe that if you could teach somebody a great golf swing without a ball, say they've never hit a ball, but they just learn to turn, they learn to rotate, they're on the 430 line, they're using their ground pressures correctly, they're transferring their weight correctly, they're accelerating the club, the post impact pivot thrust is all in place. You get all of it. You could teach somebody just without a ball, just bam, just swinging a golf club. I think that if you put a ball in the way, they're gonna be pretty good. They're still going to have to learn some hand-eye coordination, and they're going to have to learn some low point control. But that's going to come pretty quick. That stuff. So I think that technique is really, really the most beneficial thing. And I will even take it to the next level, that I really think that the best thing for the mental game is having great technique. Because if you got great technique, it just takes a lot of pressure off. It makes the whole thing a lot easier. And you start becoming a lot more confident when you've got great technique and you can feel the golf club through the strike. When you're holding shaft flex, you got the pressure in your hands. You can feel exactly where that leading edge of the club face is at, as compared to just a swing technique where you're just releasing the thing and it's just going through, and you just hope, okay, I hope it comes through. It's all timing based and all that stuff. I don't think it's good. So I know that was a bit of a mouthful there, but I do think the talent code book is really spot on. I didn't see anything about it that seemed like it wasn't correct.
Well, the only unsatisfying thing for me was it doesn't really give you examples of golfing deep practice, and obviously being a golfer, that was what I wanted, but it's not a golf book. So that's what I was hoping we could maybe sort of come up with some things which try to explain what actually is deep practice. Um, I mean, should we talk about myelin a little bit? Because I mean, is that worth talking about? Sort of explaining what he says about how people learn, what actually goes on. Because I mean, most people, um, if they think about skill, I know I would certainly think about something. You would call it muscle memory. What he explains in the book is that really there is no such thing as muscle memory. And what is actually going on is in your brain with a substance called myelin, which is spelled Myelin. If anyone wants to Google it, myelin. So basically, what he says is that for every human movement, thought, or feeling, there is a precisely timed electrical signal which travels in your brain through a chain of neurons, a circuit of nerve fibers. And now myelin is the insulation that wraps these nerve fibers and increases the signal speed and accuracy. So what he's basically saying is to do anything, if you're just moving your arm backwards and forwards, it's your brain that's firing a circuit. And every time you do it, you form a layer of insulation on that circuit. The more you do it, the more insulation you get, the faster you fire the circuit. So how is that useful to know? The bit that might take
No, it doesn't hurt to know it. I think all that
doesn't
stuff's in the book, and it's read the book if you're interested in the underlying form of how the body learns things and processes information and applies that to repeatability and mastering something. I think the book covers that really well, and I think it's certainly beneficial to know that, because it gives you maybe some confidence. It backs up certainly what we do, the approach that we've taken towards teaching, rather than, you jump on YouTube and it said with this one magic move, you're guaranteed to pick up 50, just all that nonsense, right? I mean, it's utter nonsense, that stuff. Um, the golf swing is no different than learning a musical instrument. I'm a musician. I play guitar and drums as well. And to break everything down from guitar chords, you learn this chord, this chord, this chord, this chord, and then you learn how to connect those chords through scales and all this sort of stuff. Or playing on the piano. There's no way you're just going to sit down and just rip out some guitar, complicated guitar song without learning the basic rudiment fundamentals of the chords and the scales that move in between these things. And it just takes time. I mean, just learning guitar is very strange because some very awkward you know hand positions. Our fingers are all over the place, really contorted and twisted, and you just keep doing that over and over. You got to build strength and all this stuff. It's just not going to have this one magic move to guitar playing if you just do this one thing. I mean, it's the same thing with golf. It's just utter rubbish. It's nonsense. You've got to learn specific moves. So in the golf swing, what I've done with the module work is just to break it down. We start at impact, like, because ultimately that's what we're doing. So we start there with module one, boom, we're right on that bag, we're right at impact alignments. Then you're going to learn, like, oh, everything that leads up to that starts to make sense. Like, here's why we take the backswing the certain way we do. Here's what we're trying to do to transition the club, when we get into module 6 and transition all that. But the understanding is, like, how's that coming back to impact? What are we doing from just that, 3 feet, 3 feet prior to impact, 3 feet after impact? And Neil, like, the in the module 4 with the magic trick drill, and how that, that was the big light bulb for you. Then you go out and win all these tournaments after that. But to understand, like, oh, at module 4, it's like, okay, that's module 1, right? So we're here. Here's the module 1 starting position. Oh, module 3. Oh, we're over here. Okay. And then when you get into module 5 and you start understanding the hand attitudes and how that's going to be applied to slotting the club, flattening the shaft, and all this stuff in modules 5 and 6, and then 7, we should start, bringing the whole thing together into one complete motion. It's like, are we ready to do this? And then we look at the students. It's like, I think we need to go back a little bit. Let's work a little bit more here. Let's work a little bit more here until we get module 7, to where the golf swing's starting to just look like a complete thing. And then once we've got that, then it's like, okay, then we got ball positions and what we're going to do. And we should be able to draw, fade, and hit straight shots from the 3 main ball positions, right? And then, so we learned through in the 9th module, we learned first we learned the ball positions and the rotating plane lines, so that we can adapt ourselves to any situation on the golf course, whether it's downhill, side hill, uphill, down, all the possibilities of the different lives that you're going to have, and how you're going to move ball positions around, and wind and all this stuff. And then when we move into the 9th module, and we learn the correct way, the easy way, the really easy way to draw and fade the ball through post impact intentions, we don't have to change our setup. We don't change our backswing. We don't change transition. We don't change the downswing. We don't change any of that to draw and fade the ball. All of that's the same. We only change what we're doing post impact to draw and fade the ball. And much easier that way. Don't have to say, okay, if I'm going to draw the ball, I mean, we know there's a million ways to do it. Go to the driving range and you can see people slicing the ball with all kinds of different swings, and hooking the ball with all kinds of different swings. A lot of different ways to curve the ball. We want the simplest, most economical, efficient way to do it, that's been supported by the great strikers. And that's what we teach. So then now you've got something where, okay, you've got great technique. Now you go out and play the game, go out and enter tournaments. And then, like you said, start developing this myelin. Like, you really start, what we used to call muscle memory, right? But he's saying, it's just, I think it's really a getting caught in the semantics of the terminology there or whatever. But that kind of idea of, like, grooving it in and really, really taking it to the to the course at that point. And and then the other thing too is, like, for the better players, the players that are already, low handicap, scratch players, or even touring pros. And Bradley's been working on all this stuff too. And where I think recently this year there was a tour player that just got reminded, of basically a module 1. and went out and won on the PGA Tour. Just he was doing Module One drill on. You could see him on TV, doing the drill in the fairway, and then goes out and wins the tournament. So just obviously he had known how to do that in the past, but it got kind of sidetracked with some other things and just really needed to focus back. So I think
Yeah,
that's why it's been successful, and we've had such a good track record
yeah.
for
But Bradley seems to have a lot of success very.
improve.
Sorry, Bradley seems to have a lot of success very quickly with some of these like top level players, doesn't he? Like he works with guys and then they'll straight away win on the PGA Tour or on the DP Tour. He's had it was it Peter Malnati, I think it was, won
Okay, yeah,
recently,
yeah.
and I think it
Hmm.
was Oliver Wilson won really quickly with him on the. So he's just obviously, these guys who've already got a lot of good moves going on already. He's just got to move a couple of things in the right direction. I mean, most of us are going to need to change 100 things in our golf swings to really improve. Which I think is the interesting part of understanding mile and formation. I like to think that I had my old golf swing before ABS, and I had a whole load of miling built up for that very poor golf swing. But then to change it to a better golf swing was going to take a whole load of work because it only takes about 1.5 seconds for me to take the club back and hit the ball. You haven't really got time to think in that time. You've got to do a whole load of work to overwrite to compete with your old golf swing. So you don't just watch a video on YouTube and all of a sudden become a good golfer. You've got to put the work in. You've got to put the hours in. You've got to get the reps in. I mean, one of the things it says in the book is deep practice multiplied by 10,000 hours equals world class skill. I mean, most of us haven't got 10,000 hours, so to really try and spend your time effectively and target your practice so that you are at least entering into the realms of deep practice means that the average player is going to have the chance of improving. Might not have enough time to become world class, but if we can target our practice with our valuable time, people have got family, people have got kids, they haven't got 8 hours a day to hit golf balls. But if you can spend a couple of hours a week getting into that deep practice zone, then you can actually improve in a smaller amount of time. And that's what I think ABS does a great job of. Once you understand deep practice, and if like us, you understand how the modules work.
Yeah, we don't, we don't just teach touring pros. To me, the most important thing is just to improve just your average person, your average golfer, and most people have jobs and families and responsibilities. They don't have time to be out there getting going to the driving range and hitting all these golf balls and this sort of thing. We can train right at home in our garage or in the backyard and impact bags and just learn this stuff, be part of I have so many students where this is part of their daily routine. And like I've always said, you can just quit your gym membership for sure, right? I mean, just it's a good workout. This can integrate into your health as well. And go out in the garage or out of the backyard or whatever and spend 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes or something, and go through your module work and your strengthening. The impact bag is important because you get resistance training. I mean, be like a boxer, you've got to have that medicine bag, that bag they're hitting to, to something. You have to have some resistance there. So we can quickly um, start developing strength in a matter of 6 months. I mean, I've seen players that were just so weak with the module one drilling, just coming in, just really like, just go, and after 6 months, you're just bam, I mean, you can see the muscle tone. I mean, you can almost see it in their arms, getting stronger. So it's really good. And we need strength. We need flexibility. Um, we need to understand the geometry of what we're trying to do, and we just cover those things. So we just make sure that everything is right on line, and we're very precise about it and very detailed about it, because that's what you need. You need all those things. You need precision and detail and strength and speed and an understanding as to the objective of what we're trying to do, which is basically to hold shaft flex, which is going to get control of the club head and the club face and the low point. And when we get control of the club as it's moving through the strike, then that's just going to make us better. I mean, how can we not be better if you're actually controlling this thing that you're have in your hands as compared with just guessing? And I just think the whole kind of release, throw it at the ball, kind of hope and guess timing. And I think it's much more difficult and takes much more practice to not only to learn that, but to maintain it. And I think I've had so many students that have, over the years, they went through the ABS course, and then they would say, well, we had a child and blah, blah, blah. We had to, take care of an ailing parent or something. I wasn't able to play for 2 years or 3 years or something. I want to get back into golf. And they said they just go back out and bam, it's just like right there. And it really didn't take much of a setback at all because they learned good technique. So important.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for almost an hour. Is there anything else, Neil, in the book that you think applies?
I don't think so. I've got scribbles through most of my notes here now, so I think we're pretty much done. I mean, the one thing I would say is if anyone's listening or watching, they've got any thoughts on deep practice specifically, come along to the forum. I suppose they can leave a comment if this goes on YouTube. Just maybe leave some comments on YouTube what your ideas of deep practice would be. It's certainly something I'm interested in. I mean, that's the whole point of why I wanted to do this was to sort of talk about deep practice, and how certainly I feel anyway that ABS gets you well into the deep practice sort of sweet spot. Because I think, like I say, I think if you can target your time more efficiently, you've got more chance of improving. Whereas if you're just watching stuff on YouTube, trying this, trying that, going from this to that, you're never going to lay down enough myelin to go back to talking about myelin. You're never going to get the muscle memory in the right place to override what your old golf swing is doing. So you're just going to go around in circles. And that's where, sadly, I feel most people are just going around in circles with the golf game, not getting any better. A lot of my mates talk about this. And I think it's a bit of a problem with just being so much information out there. You really need to pick your skill sets and then work at it.
And just to remind that a lot of that stuff out there, I mean, the teachers are not specifically saying this is hitting technique, this is swinging technique. You just never see that, right? It hasn't really worked its way into the consciousness of golf professional teachers. So, a good tip might be a good tip for a swinging technique, but it's not going to apply to hitting. And I think, vice versa. So there's a real gap right there, and that needs to be, hopefully at some point, it'll become part of the conversation.
All right. I think that's a good place to stop. And we'll see you next time on the Advanced Ball Striking Podcast.
Okay. We'll see you soon.